Check one, 2, 3. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. All right, my guest today is a freelance sound mixer who has worked on reality TV shows, documentaries, scripted productions, and advertisements. He's based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Please welcome Bill Mitchell.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Now, you're located in Georgia working on a film, right?
That's correct. I'm boom operating in Columbus, Georgia for a film called Electric Jesus.
Can you tell us much about it?
Yeah, I think so. It's basically a period piece set in the 80s about a Christian hair metal band. So it's been pretty interesting so far. We're 3 days in. We're going to be doing a lot of playback with lip sync. And I believe, we haven't gotten to this yet, but I think we're going to be doing performances where the band will actually sing on the first take to a playback track, which will be recorded, and then on the subsequent takes, they'll be lip-syncing to their initial recording. So they'll be lip-syncing to a more live playback track rather than a studio one. Now, are you handling playback as well? Occasionally, we have an intern that's sort of functioning as almost a utility. So she's done a little bit of playback so far, which has simply been for a scene where the band is singing along with a tape cassette player. But yeah, I imagine I'll be doing the playback for the bigger live performances. Now, for some of our listeners that don't know much about playback, kind of give us a little quick overview of what all is involved. Sure. Like I said, we haven't gotten to the bigger performances yet, but basically the director will give us a file. I think we got an MP4, and so there was some issue with having to convert it and all that, but generally it would be an MP3 or a WAV file that's then placed onto a laptop or an iPad and then played back through a loudspeaker system for the band to lip sync with on camera, and then that track is used later in the film, but I am also booming ambience of the track for sync purposes. Now, I guess, is there a separation of the audio? Are they going to be using like earwigs or anything like that, or? I don't think so. So far, we've just had the playback basically pointed away from where I'm booming to try to catch the sounds that the band is making, and we keep the playback a little bit lower so that they can still hear the actors, and I guess there'll be some post work done to try to cut out some of the onset audio, and yeah. Okay. What's your setup? Are you, as a boom op, are you wireless? Are you wired? I've got a UM400 transmitter going to the sound mixer. His name's Carl Carden. He's from Orlando, Florida. I'm using a Schoeps MK41 and a Sanken CS3. And it's going into an MM1 preamp, and then I have a Lectro IFB receiver for talkback with Carl. All right. So, and how long did you say you've been on the set so far? Only 3 days so far. 1 prep day and 3 days of shooting. Now, are you out in the heat at all, or is it all inside? Yeah. The first day we were in basically, I guess, a fellowship hall, and it sounded like a cave. So I was using the CS3 to try to reject as much of the room ambience as possible. They're shooting it all handheld. There's a lot of headroom in all the shots, so that's been kind of fun to try to get as close to the frame and get as close to the actor, but also with the handheld, you never quite know when he's going to tilt up, tilt down, so it's just been kind of a dance to navigate all that. Okay. Now, and they're wired up as well? Yes. We're using COS-11s for the actors, and they have UM400 transmitters as well. Now, for the live performances, are those all isolated as well? We haven't done it yet, so I'm not entirely sure how we're going to do it, but I imagine we'll probably wire them. I'll probably boom some dialogue as they lead into the performance, and then once they start lip syncing on stage, I imagine that's probably just going to cut right into the recording of them singing and then the backing track.
Okay, well, let's jump in and talk a little bit about what's in your audio bag. So just kind of tell us what mixer you're using, mics, and all your preferred equipment.
Absolutely. I use a Sound Devices 633 mixer. I've got a Kortwich 3-channel preamp for my channels 4, 5, and 6 that I just recently purchased used. I love it. I've only used it on one project so far, but it works great. I've got 2 SRC Lectrosonics A-band units, a Lectrosonics SRb Block 21 unit. Let's see, I use COS-11 lavalier mics, and I use DPA 6060 lavaliers as well. And I've got a couple of SMQVs and some LT transmitters. And then I use the NP L7S lithium-ion batteries, a remote audio power distribution system, and I'm using a Lectro UM400 in IFB mode to send out for IFBs for clients. Oh, and I use a carbon fiber boom pole, and I use a CMIT 5U for outdoor and just for situations where there's a lot of background noise, and then a CMC MK41 for indoor dialogue.
And timecode?
I use Tentacle Sync boxes for timecode.
The originals or the Bluetooth?
The newer ones, yeah.
One of our listeners actually wrote in and said, his name is Esteban Rodriguez, and he wrote in and wanted to know, do you reset your mixer at the start of each project? And if you do you have presets that you use as well?
I don't reset the mixer for every project. I have on occasion, and there have been situations where I needed to clone the settings from another mixer's setup. I did a reality show in a jail a month or two ago, and I had to have the exact same settings as that mixer, so we did a factory reset and cloned his settings. But I don't generally do that, but maybe that's something I should be doing.
Okay. Do you have a setup, like a generic preset that you've created or anything?
Yeah. Usually I'll have boom on channel 1 and then lavs across the rest. And yeah, that stays pretty consistent. I'll rename lavs with character or actor names depending, and then I always rename all the folder settings and the scene and that kind of thing for each project.
All right. You worked on a project called Night Watch in New Orleans. That was a reality show?
Yeah, that was at the end of 2014, I believe. That was my introduction into field audio, actually. I had been a musician and been recording pretty much my whole life, but a friend of mine needed someone to day play for him, and he basically gave me a rundown of all the equipment, and they just kind of sent me in. It was a show where we followed EMTs and police officers and firemen, and so it was my first night in New Orleans, and it was Halloween, and it was very wild. I was learning how to use the equipment and how to be on a reality show and navigating New Orleans on Halloween at the same time. It was a pretty interesting experience.
Wow. Now, do you remember what the setup was, the audio setup?
It was 788, and I think we used 411 receivers and maybe SMQV transmitters and Sanken mics, and I can't recall what boom mic I was using. I just can't recall what it was.
Were you guys on the run?
Yes, I was in the back of an ambulance and had 2 cameras, and we would basically pull up to a situation, and I would have to leap out of the ambulance and get out of the way before the 2 cameras came out of the ambulance to start shooting. We had a mic on each of the EMTs that we would put on with safety pins because they were moving around so much. Any kind of adhesive would probably just fall off. But I would boom anything that I couldn't catch on the lavs, and yeah, it was interesting.
All right. And there was another project, Locke and Holmes. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, that was it was just sort of a web series and slash pilot that I shot in Nashville. It was with a couple of new acquaintances who hired me. I guess they got my name from someone, and it was about these two women who were lushes, and they also fancy themselves detectives, which is Sherlock and Holmes, Locke and Holmes. And yeah, it was just kind of a series of vignettes, and then there was a 26-minute piece. It was a lot of fun. Everyone involved was really fun to work with, and it was a combination of lavs and booming, and it turned out really, really well. They shot it on an Ursa Mini Pro, so it looked great. It was just a ton of fun. It was probably the most fun experience I've had on a set so far.
So just multiple locations?
Yeah, lots of locations. People's bedrooms, kitchens, outdoor and neighborhoods, that kind of thing.
Now, what's your favorite Expendables when it comes to miking up talent?
I like to use the Super Sticky, I believe it's called, and I like to use the RM11s sometimes for the COS-11s, and then the DPA 6060s have a mount that I like quite a bit. It's very low profile. On this project that I'm on currently, the mixer Carl Carden showed me he uses the Rycote. The adhesive on those can be a little weak and it'll fall off, so he actually uses that as a base and then puts the mic on that, and then we'll place a overcover over that and then use a super sticky dot on the back of the undercover, and that seems to be working out terrifically, so I may stick with that in the future.
Extra secure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, I was checking out your Instagram account, and you've done some projects for Daisy Dukes Films. So tell us about working with them.
Yeah, it's an all-female production company. They do horror short films, and Daisy Dukes is for like shorts. It actually took me longer than I'd care to admit to get that joke. But they're little short horror films, and I'm also a composer, so I've been doing the scores for those as well. I've only done Onset audio for one of their projects, which was about an organ that a young lady inherits that's possessed and turns her into a monster, and the music she's playing starts becoming more and more bizarre as the film goes on. But they're great folks to work with. A lot of all-female production companies are starting to pop up more and more, which is a great thing, and so I'm just happy to be involved with that.
All right. Now, do you do any post-audio work as well?
A little bit. I did the final sound mix for their most recent project, and I do a lot of little corporate pieces, just editing dialogue or voiceover in with a backing musical track, and then kind of a final master. Mostly just kind of low budget stuff.
Okay. How do you handle the work life and the personal life balance?
Well, I have a girlfriend and 3 cats. She also is in production. She goes between being a production coordinator, or sometimes she is an art department coordinator. So she's generally gone and I'm generally gone, and we just kind of stay in touch over the phone, and we have a friend that watches our cats when we're gone, and when she's gone and I'm at home, I take care of the cats, and vice versa when she's there and I'm gone. And yeah, it works out pretty well. It's we've been together for about 10 years, so it's nice to have that little bit of space every once in a while.
Do you guys ever get to work on the same projects together?
Yeah, on occasion. We worked on the jail reality show together. I was the field E&G team, and she was in the production office. But yeah, sometimes we get to work together, and it's a lot of fun. But we're in different departments, so it's nice. We'll see each other at night, but then when we're working, we'll be kind of off doing our own thing.
All right. Now, you also worked on a prison project. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, it was for a show called 60 Days In. Basically, they have people send in online resumes, and then they will kind of quote-unquote arrest them and put them in the jail just to kind of get a sense of what's going on in the jail. And I was with a team that went inside the general population, and we would take inmates out and do interviews with them, and sometimes we would take our own cast members out and interview them, and that was it was a lot of great people to work with, but it was a very intense atmosphere. It was kind of heavy, but it was a good experience. I learned a lot, and it was interesting because when we were in the general population at the time, the cell doors weren't working, so everyone was out all at once. So there was this just ambient mid-range just nightmare, and so I had to crank my headphones up all the way just to even hear what I was recording, and I used the CMIT for that and just used both roll-off options to try to remove as much low end and low mid as I could.
Okay. Were you wiring guys up as well?
I think the audio lead would wire up the sheriff and the police chief when they would do some of the arrest segments and then for their interviews, but for the inmate interviews, we're not really allowed to touch them, so we would have to have a boom set up in a private room where we would interview them, and that was about as close as we'd get.
Okay. Now, so far, what's been the most interesting project you've worked on?
The most fun was the Lock and Holmes. I think the most interesting was either the jail project or this current project, just because there's a lot of challenges and having to learn how to be creative to get around some of the complications. This current film I'm on especially, they're using an overhead lighting system, and I guess it's a wireless lighting system. They look like fluorescent bulbs, but I can't imagine that they are. But that creates a lot of boom shadows, and there's a lot of fog from the special effects department that also creates boom shadows. And working in environments where it sounds like a cave, or we're in a hotel room that's half the size of the hotel room that I'm in currently, and having, 5 people in the band, 2 additional actors, a cameraman, a script supervisor, the special effects guy, and then an on-set photographer, and then me trying to boom around all of those people, especially when the camera is handheld. It's just, it's a lot of fun to work around those challenges, and it's just kind of a great experience.
Now, what has been your worst on-set experience?
I think probably the Night Watch show, simply because I was learning audio and dealing with the intensity of being in New Orleans, rolling around with EMTs and police officers, and it was just a little bit dangerous. So I was kind of had a general sense of anxiety the entire time. I haven't really worked with anyone that wasn't, a lot of fun to work with, but yeah, just the situation itself was just very intense, and it was a learning experience at the same time. So yeah, it was just kind of a combination of things.
No nightmare type situations?
I think I've been really lucky so far. I haven't had any situations where I just wanted to walk away, and I've never quit a job, and I haven't been fired from anything, luckily, so far. So yeah, I think I've been really lucky so far.
Did you have any mentors along the way that kind of helped you get started?
Absolutely. There was a gentleman in New Orleans, Ian Wood, who was the one that gave me kind of the crash course on the equipment before I went in for Night Watch. There's a gentleman in Nashville named Clay Howard. When I first moved back to Nashville from New Orleans, because I grew up in Nashville, I didn't have a client base or anyone who knew who I was really when I first moved there, and so he was giving me a lot of his overflow work, and that really helped me kind of ease into the Nashville working community. And he's always, fielded any questions that I have, or he's always been willing to meet me for lunch when I'm going on to a project that has a situation that I haven't encountered before, to kind of give me advice and talk me through anything that I might encounter. And it's been pretty great.
All right. Now, have you ever forgotten any equipment on your way to set?
Yeah, I have. I did a documentary about Mardi Gras in New Orleans, I want to say in 2015, and it was a split day, and we did a morning with the parade, and then we were going to go back at night and follow 2 folks around and interview them. And the card from the morning got cleared, and I just completely blanked and forgot to put the card back into the mixer, and we got on location for the second half of the day. Camera was set up. They said roll. I hit record and looked down, and there was no SD card in there. And I have never forgotten anything since then. I almost get myself into a panic before each gig and just go over in my head and check everything at least 10 times to make sure I have everything I need, because that was incredibly embarrassing.
Wow. So what did you end up doing?
I had to run back to base camp and get the SD card, because I think all of the stores around didn't have any for sale, and it was Mardi Gras, so there were parades everywhere, so roads were blocked off, so it was even kind of a nightmare getting back to base camp to get that SD card, but it had to happen, and I was pretty humiliated, but it ended up working out just fine. But yeah, it was just really scary.
Man. Well, at least it worked out, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, if you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently?
It's been kind of a fun journey, going from just getting a crash course and being thrown into a reality situation and just having to learn how to do everything, or failing. And obviously I took the path of learning. I guess I might have maybe taken a short class on field sound recording before trying to get into everything, because there were some situations with some of the equipment where I had to have the manual on my phone and just kind of refer to it occasionally if there was something that I wasn't sure how to do or couldn't remember. I think I would have preferred not to have to do that. So yeah, maybe just a little bit of training in advance, since I'm sort of self-taught. Other than that, it's been a really fun kind of journey, just learning as I go and learning all the equipment and just kind of feeling it out as I'm doing it. And yeah, it's just been pretty great.
All right. Now, if some of our listeners wanted to get into production sound, what kind of advice would you give them?
I could tell them how I did it. I basically got kind of grandfathered in day playing, but I know that's not possible for everyone. But when I first moved back to Nashville, one of the things I did was I just started working on student films and taking really low budget gigs, simply to make connections and start meeting people and getting my name around town, and just doing the absolute best job I could so that people would say something about my work ethic and the audio I was delivering. I read a lot about equipment. I try to learn as much as I can. I'm always reading about newer equipment, and I hang out at True Audio in Nashville, which is the local sound rental house, and they're always happy to talk to me about new equipment or used equipment, or just field any questions I have, and they're all really great guys. And I went to college with a couple of them for film, so that really helps a lot. But kind of getting in the grind and doing really low budget projects at first, just to get your name out and get some experience with the people that are working in the area where you live, has really worked out great for me. And passing out business cards as much as I possibly can.
You know, I run into so many sound people. I say, hey, do you have a card? And they're like, no.
Yeah, my wallet's full of them. I try to always have at least 20 cards on me at any time.
That's true. Yeah, I have two sets. I have my regular podcast business card that has all my information, but then I also have a sound guy card as well. And but I'm just surprised that there's more people don't have business cards, because it is the way to kind of connect.
Absolutely, and I wonder if maybe it's a thing with the newer generation that they're less used to having business cards to pass out because of Instagram and things like that. But I find that both really, really help a lot. That
is true. Well, is there any particular gear that you're looking at that you want to purchase next?
I'm really curious about the venue system, the Electro venue system. Carl's using that on his mixer on this film set, and it looks really fun to use, and I'm pretty excited about it. And also the antennas, the shark fin antennas, I'm pretty excited to learn how to use. And then I know Lectro is starting to go completely digital with some of their receivers and transmitters, and I'm excited about that. And the DPA mics are a little newer for me. I just recently started using those, and I think they sound phenomenal, and I'd love to learn more about them. So hopefully I'll get to basically pump a lot of the money that I make on gigs back into my gear. I'm having to do it less and less as my rig becomes more and more complete. But yeah, I'm starting to move up in tiers with the lav microphones. So I'm at the DPAs now.
All right, nice. Well, Bill, as we kind of start to wrap things up, what's the best way for people to connect with you online?
Well, my Gmail address is wmitchellmusic@gmail. My Instagram is peanutbuttermanamanam, which was I went to some friends of mine's wedding, and the bride was had a couple of drinks, and she was trying to say peanut butter M&Ms, and it came out peanut butter manamanam, and I just thought that was hilarious. And she was actually the one that convinced me to get an Instagram account because we were in a band together. So that's another good way to get in touch with me. And then I'm on Facebook. I believe it's Bill Mitchell. And yeah, I'm always happy to answer any questions anyone has and give any advice that, I feel like is helpful. And yeah.
All right, great. Well, I just want to say thanks to Bill Mitchell for being on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And a big thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you'd like us to discuss a particular topic, please send us an email at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you to subscribe and leave us a comment. We're available on Apple Podcast, and for Android users, check out Google Podcasts. Also, we're on Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.